Now, before I actually watch the video, I will say that all of you should subscribe to Dolce Jeans because he makes very good content, very thought-provoking fashion content. It's really nice. I really like it. I do enjoy it. And what I'm going to react to is a video that he made about like gatekeeping. And what I like about it, he didn't necessarily say that gatekeeping is good or bad. He was more contrasting kind of like the pros and cons between each, which I really liked. It was quite nuanced, his take. So anyway, let's go through this video and see what he says and react to what he says.
In my opinion, gatekeeping is like barring access or access to information about a social circle, a social community, like a cultural community, or like niche topics within this social circle or community. So simple things like, oh, what's the name of that song? No. Where did you get that shirt from? No. What's the name of this movie? No. Hey, do you know where I can learn more about? No. You know, things like that. Gatekeeping over the past few years has garnered a lot of discourse on the internet, especially in the fashion scene, on whether or not you should gatekeep, whether or not you shouldn't gatekeep, what gatekeeping says about your character, and so on and so forth. I personally think that gatekeeping makes no sense in a lot of situations, but in certain situations you really should gatekeep because it's very good, effective, and it can actually foster growth within people. And I think gatekeeping, whether you do and whether you don't, has a lot to do with spoon feeding and mediocrity in fashion, and today I'll go into what I think those correlations are all about. So my name is Dolce Jeans. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for all the support on the channel as always, and without further ado, let's get into it.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just remembering he did divide this video into various sections, which I loved, because he was essentially saying, so there's this idea of like stupid gatekeeping, which is like gatekeeping where it doesn't really make sense. And then he had other sections saying where gatekeeping is more viable and it actually makes a lot more sense and it's actually almost needed, which I did like, because I have something to say about both of those sides and both of those opinions. But anyway, let's continue.
Okay, so when we look at examples of stupid gatekeeping, in my opinion, it's like me walking down the street wearing a shirt that says Osbat on the front, like OSBATT, and somebody's like, hey, where'd you get that shirt? I think the font looks really cool. And I'm like, oh, I can't give that detail away, man. You gotta keep it on the low, man.
That's so funny. You know, there's a certain kind of fashion person that is always supposedly trying to keep things on the low. But what they're keeping on the low is not even low key. Like what they're keeping on the low is the most mainstream thing in the world. They're the kind of people that like someone on the street sees their Rick Owens Ramones and then people are like, oh, where did you get those? I kind of like those. They look like Converses with a thicker sole. And they're like, oh, I can't tell you, man. I don't want everyone wearing it. Like, bro, that's not even low key. Just tell the person what they want to know. Like, it's not even low key. You're doing way too much. And there are a lot of people in fashion that I encounter like that. They're like, oh, let's keep it on the low, bro. But it's like, it's already loud. You can't keep that on the low, even if you tried.
You know, trying to be like not a dickhead about it, but you're still a dickhead because you're not giving these people simple information. Because if that person were to go on Google and search up Osbat right in front of me, they could probably figure out in the next 10 seconds that Years of Tears made the shirt. And you know, it's like they got the information just as easily as, you know, maybe not as easily actually, but almost just as easily as me saying it to them. So it was really pointless for me to gatekeep because this information is like on the very first page of Google. You know, if somebody just searches it up and it's like a visual thing that they can search. Same with like brands that just, you know, brand themselves in general, like Hellstar or something similar. Basically things that people can stumble upon like any way, shape or form, like a TikTok ad or a TikTok viral video or a meme or something like that. If you're trying to gatekeep something like that, bro, you have what a lot of people would say, you know, is like fragile individuality, which is one of the main arguments against gatekeeping nowadays. It's like, oh, if you gatekeep, you're not secure in yourself. You think that other people wearing the same clothes as you is going to make you any less individual, which is definitely a good shout. I hear it in certain cases, like gatekeeping a popular song when there's like Shazam exists or something like that. You know, stupid stuff like that. I remember when
That's funny. He said people gatekeep popular songs when Shazam exists. People are like, what song are you listening to? Like, oh, I gotta keep it on the low. I don't want everyone listening to my favorite artist. Like, I could literally just whip out Shazam and find out, exactly what I want to find out. But I think the more interesting part, because I think it's very obvious to know when gatekeeping is just silly and people just being annoying, like the whole I've got to keep it on the low, blah blah blah. But there are many use cases which you'll get onto, which I have a lot to say about, where it does actually make sense to gatekeep. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that because a lot of people just hear gatekeeping and they think of like elitism and like, you're trying to block people's progress and stuff. But there are many, examples where it actually does make sense to gatekeep and you probably should. Otherwise, you're not helping people.
when people tried to gatekeep Bai, even though Bai was going viral like every week on TikTok for some other stupid meme, people are in the comments of the viral video about Bai saying that people should keep Bai on the low.
Wait, people thought people thought they were keeping Bai on the low. People have been talking about Bai since like Avery Ginsberg was making YouTube videos and he used to talk about it, or like Fernando Rangel, or all those kind of content creators. Like, that's funny that people are like, oh, we got to keep Bai on the low because we got to keep the prices low. Like, Bai is not a low-key thing at all. There were whole tutorials on Grailed years ago. This is when I was like in uni or like late sixth form. So I must have been like 17, 18 years old. Damn, that's like 8-9 years ago. That is not low-key at all. That's funny. People think they're keeping Bai on the low. That's jokes.
As if that makes any sense, right? Gatekeeping something like that is like very popular already before we even found out about it. Like the newer generation of Gen Z people, like there are videos on YouTube with tens of thousands of views on how to use Bai. Bai went viral every 2 seconds at one point, and people are like, no, keep it on the low. Like trying to gatekeep something like that people will willingly and freely just talk about on the internet doesn't make any sense in the slightest.
Yeah, so we've got into the healthy gatekeeping section of the video, which is where I was saying there are actually a lot of use cases where gatekeeping is actually very valid. So before we go into this section and we continue watching this, so something I want to say about healthy gatekeeping, or just where gatekeeping doesn't make sense, like all these people saying, oh, we're going to keep Bai on the low and all that sort of stuff, is I always want to help people. If I can give people information, I would absolutely love to, even though it might have taken me so much time to gain a certain amount of information or so much research that I had to do to gain this information. I don't mind giving it to someone. My issue is sometimes the entitlement that people have is where you don't want to give them any of the information, because I've had situations where someone will DM me on Instagram and I don't respond immediately, which is very highly unlikely because I get hundreds of messages a day, which I definitely don't respond to because I've only got so much time in a day. But I eventually try to get to all my messages. Eventually, I'll get there someday. And if I don't respond to these people in like 2 hours, they get mad. So when I get to responding to some of these Instagram DMs, it'll literally just be like a thread of like, oh, please can you tell me about this? And then followed by, oh, you're an idiot. You think you're all that. You think you're famous. You're acting brand new, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm just not going to give you this information. Now you're just never going to get that information. So I think it's kind of strange when people want something from you for free, information that, I've garnered over the years. And instead of just being patient and waiting for me to actually give them the information, they get really angry and actually have like throw a fit at me because I don't give them the information when they want it or within the time frame that they need it. So yeah, that's a situation where gatekeeping is very, very much justified.
Okay, now we're gonna get into like gatekeeping and how it relates to spoon feeding and mediocrity. So let's say a brand like Rick Owens, right, that has decades of history, and there's so much stuff to just find out about Rick Owens everywhere, like on the website where they put a lot of articles and interviews with Rick, through books, magazines, interviews everywhere on YouTube. You can just scour and scour and scour the internet and learn. It takes so much time to learn about these brands. You can spend hours a day learning about Rick Owens and compiling all this information. Maybe you write it down, maybe you just memorize it, maybe you put it in like a internet folder, like a YouTube playlist or something, and you keep all of this information. You can go on the internet and like just give it all for free, which is like cool, right? But I also think that this kind of does contribute to spoon feeding. I've posted like promotional TikToks on my videos on the internet, and like I've been like, oh, this is like a slightly longer video. It's like 20 minutes plus. And people are like, oh yes, I love video essays. I love sitting down and just watching video essays. Like video essays are cool. And of course, a lot of people do learn like that, but I think a lot of people just sit down and consume without actually like doing any supplementary research or any quick education on the side that's supposed.
Let me stop there. That's facts. So that was a really good point that he made in terms of a lot of people now don't want to do any research. I'll give you a good example. Like when I started my TikTok, there were quite a lot of people who used to watch my YouTube channel. And so when I made a TikTok, a lot of them found it and were like, oh, like, I'm so happy that you made a TikTok because I used to watch your YouTube channel. But then when I started getting into TikTok, I didn't have the attention span to watch YouTube videos anymore. So I lose attention if I watch anything longer than, 2 minutes. And it's just like, I don't know how you can learn anything about anything if that's the way that you consume information. Like the only way. That's crazy. Like reading books obviously is the longest form, and it's probably where you go deep and you actually start doing a deep dive. The internet is very deep. You can find so many things on the internet. You can just scour the internet and just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and supplement that with books and stuff. But you're not going to do that unless you at least have the attention span to watch a 20-minute, 30-minute YouTube video. So I think the next generation, they might not be particularly bright. I can see that happening because if their attention span is not even enough to watch a 20-minute video, I fear for the future generations, honestly. There is only so much information you can get from TikToks. It's horrible. Like, how can you learn anything substantial if all you do is try to look for the shortest form of, gaining the information? And even going back to what Dolce Jeans was saying, which is a very strong point, is that even the people that love the video essays, the people that, can watch a 20 to 30 minute YouTube video, they don't even go and look at anything else to supplement that information or to even critique what they are listening to or what they're watching, or, to have a deeper understanding or to bring context into what they're watching before they watch it. So they just watch that video essay, take everything for face value and as fact, even though a lot of it might not be, or a lot of it might be subjective opinions, not necessarily facts. So you have to kind of research more about that thing and then draw your own conclusions. But obviously you can use that video essay as part of the process of coming to your own conclusion about a topic. But yeah, it's a big issue I've seen in fashion right now. But anyway, let's continue because Dolce Jeans is spitting. He's spitting.
Supposed to help reinforce this knowledge that they learned in the video essay. Now, pause. I'm not trying to be a buzzkill because some people really just want to watch a quick, or not even a quick, just a really fun 1 hour video about something they've never heard about and it's not that serious for them. But if you're somebody that takes fashion really seriously, or a certain brand, you say you're a big fan of a brand, but like you only listen to like video essays and TikTok reviews about this brand and you don't actually do any reading for yourself about like the brand or the person who made the brand or the designer who works for the brand now, it's like you're just being spoon-fed information without actually having any real good foundational ideas or information for yourself to form actually good, sensible opinions. And when you get a lot of your information from just video essays and TikToks, you're more susceptible to mistakes by human error, people giving you false information, And you have all of these random fact bubbles that just float around in your brain without understanding like where some of this information comes from, what it leads to, what it relates to, and why it's important and why it matters to know. So spoon feeding, being spoon fed all this information at once, just creates laziness, because then you don't know how to just go out and get information on your own. You don't know how to really search and read up on your own. It just fosters not even reading, because anybody can sit down for an hour and stare at a screen, right?
Facts. Oh, Dolce spitting. So he's just said that, the issue with this, discourse around gatekeeping is that if you just keep spoon feeding people information, then they don't ever go and seek the information for themselves. And they don't actually take the time to learn about anything substantially. And so sometimes gatekeeping makes sense, because sometimes it's better for the person if you actually tell them, no, go and seek your own understanding of the thing. Let me give you some recommendations to read, but I'm not just going to tell you the exact answer for the thing that you want. That way you have to go on your own journey of understanding and learning, but then you get the full context. Because it's like, for example, I have so many hot takes, but it's based on so much research. So for example, I can say a hot take, like, I'll give you an example of like why sometimes you have to gatekeep. So I remember one time I said a hot take where I said that like Christian Dior is overrated. And I remember someone saying, oh, I used to love your channel, but I stopped watching it because I just think now you just do hot takes because you're trying to, be polarizing or whatever. And I was just thinking to myself, like, first of all, overrated just means that someone is held to a higher esteem than, let's say, they deserve or that they are warranted. And people hold Christian Dior in such a high regard, but you talk about the new look and then you realize that it's not really a new look because Cristóbal Balenciaga did that. And that's literally why Christian Dior was obsessed with Cristóbal Balenciaga, because he knew that he was better than him. You think of the likes of Yves Saint Laurent, who, when Yves Saint Laurent was working for Christian Dior, he was so good that people almost started to look away from Christian Dior himself and just be obsessed with what Yves Saint Laurent was doing. They started talking about Yves Saint Laurent like some crazy protege. It even got to the point where Christian Dior was just like, you know what, I don't think like Yves Saint Laurent because he's an absolute genius. So I'm just going to let him do his own thing. I'm not going to micromanage him. Then it got to the point where Christian Dior became so hands off that Yves Saint Laurent basically just took over the whole thing. And of course, when Christian Dior unfortunately passed, he did then actually fully take over. So if you just look at across his career, the ideas aren't super original. The timing was right. And I've said this in a video before, and I'll say it again, that in fashion, some fashion designers, not all, but I do think it's definitely the case with someone like a Christian Dior, is sometimes it can be right place, right time. It could be, the fact that the World War had just, ended and people were yearning for a certain type of fashion that wasn't around at the time. And so because people are yearning for that, making clothing where there's this level of decadence and a return to clothing when people weren't rationing fabrics and stuff like that, people are going to love that because there's a nostalgia factor. But if we're talking about Christian Dior as a designer, Christian Dior was not out here sewing with his hands like a Alexander McQueen. Like, to me, Alexander McQueen is a way better designer than Christian Dior. And so when I say Christian Dior is overrated, it's based in like a deep understanding of, fashion history and knowing and contrasting him to the other designers of his time and other greats. And then seeing, okay, compared to all these people that your name is spoken with, you're not necessarily on the level of these people, right? But because people, and going back to the spoon-fed thing and the whole gatekeeping thing, the only reason why I will say something like Christian Dior is overrated and people will just be offended by that is because they don't really do any research. And apart from not doing any research, they haven't even taken the time to actually consider, why would he say that? What's his opinion on that? Is there any evidence to back up what he's saying? Like, let me dig deeper. Let me kind of understand where he's coming from, because they are so I'll just put it this way, they so haven't done any fashion research, or they're just so in the point of only being spoon-fed information and not seeking anything for themselves, that they've been told when they first got into fashion that Christian Dior is larger than life. And so someone saying that Christian Dior could possibly be overrated absolutely decimates their worldview and their point of view on fashion, that they can't even begin to understand why anyone would even say that. So then they just choke it as, oh, you're trying to be polarizing. And so that's why sometimes you can't spoon feed people information like, oh, Christian Dior is a great designer, because then people will say that Christian Dior is a great designer but not know why. And so they just go through their lives just saying that Christian Dior is like the best thing since sliced bread. They don't even know why. They don't even know the innovation that he did. They don't even know his silhouettes. They don't even know what Dior bar suit looks like, because they haven't been to a museum and seen it in person. So there are all these issues that comes from spoon feeding people information. And I do think there are certain situations where instead of giving people the information, you have to tell them books to read and exhibitions to go to, museums to visit, and actually get them to learn that way. And that's the only way that they can learn more effectively than just telling them very specific information that they ask for.
This is like reduced attention spans. Even though like sitting down and watching a 30-minute video essay is a lot longer than a lot of people nowadays can do, I still think that when you subject yourself to like being spoon-fed over and over again every day, it's like you don't know how to search. And this basically doesn't foster any critical thinking skills in people, which in turn leads to mediocrity, which is when everybody's just saying random fact bubbles that they can memorize. You can memorize this, you can memorize that, but how much of understanding do you actually know about a brand and a brand's philosophy and why they made the clothes the way they make it, or why this collection was like that compared to this collection, and what's different from the first collection to the one now, other than visually? I think this ties into mediocrity, because then nobody will actually know how to do good research and get the real valuable information that is out there, which will lead to a whole bunch of mediocre opinions and mediocre figures and mediocre discourse in the industry, just saying anything to say anything, to say something, to have an opinion. And where gatekeeping comes back into this is that I feel like if you gatekeep information like that, that's really valuable, that you really have to search hard for, you might seem like a dickhead to whoever you're gatekeeping it to or from. But this will in turn probably make them go find it for themselves, just like how you had to. And it also kind of slightly ties into shame as well, when it's like somebody says something that's blatantly wrong, and it's like you correct them with like hardcore information. That's the type of stuff that makes people want to be like, oh man, like I got myself wrong, I can't do it again. But that's like a very, very small, specific niche type of case. So don't pay too much attention to that. But I feel like when people get spoon-fed information every day on the internet, they just don't go out and find anything for themselves, which is why we keep on seeing things being repeated as new. Because when you're constantly being spoon-fed things on a screen, you don't really have the chance to go find something for yourself that you really resonate with. It's just a whole bunch of things being thrown at you at once. Which is like you like everything that you're seeing, but you can't really create anything specific that's special and new, because it's just a whole bunch of stuff that's being thrown at you at once. And gatekeeping would essentially dial back on that, force people to go find something that they actually like, force people to read more, force people to build critical thinking skills, and force people to become better, I want to say like mini journalists, or better devotees to whatever they're devoted to. And this doesn't work well with the stupid pandemic that's going on right now. I think it's a stupid pandemic, where being able to express your
This man said it's a stupid pandemic. I love that phrase. A stupid pandemic. Also, someone in the comments is saying that you don't need to be able to sew to be a good designer. So going back to Christian Dior, why I say Christian Dior is overrated. Once again, I'm not saying he's not a good designer. I'm just saying he's overrated. I think sometimes people mix up what overrated actually means. You can say someone is overrated and also say that they're also really good at something. So when it comes to Christian Dior is mentioned with all the greats, like as one of the greatest fashion designers of. If you look at lists of greatest fashion designers of the 20th century, Christian Dior's name is going to probably be in every single one of those, right? Now, if we're talking about the best of the best designers, to be honest, they have to have everything. So if we're talking about the best of the best of the best, they have to have creative ideas. They have to have innovated in fashion. They have to have their own signature silhouettes. They have to be able to sew. They have to be able to make patterns. That's what separates like really good from like really, really good. That's what separates greatest of all time or the best that we've ever seen fashion designers from, oh, they're really, really good. And so when you think of Christian Dior, there's so many things I can point at that he can't do. Whereas there are other greats that I can't point at, oh, they can't do this or they can't do that or they can't do this or they can't do that. And so that's where you look at the John Gallianos and the Alexander McQueens and the Cristobal Balenciagas. Those are the ones that are, to me, are the best of the best of the best, right? So there's just a clear difference. There's a clear level difference. There's like a level gap, clearly. So there's nothing wrong with, not being able to necessarily sew or pattern make as a designer. But if we're going to talk about the greatest of all time, the greatest designers we've ever seen, then I don't know how Christian Dior is even anywhere near that list, to be honest. So that's the point I'm making.
Express yourself critically because of things that you actually know and deduced well because of what you're reading and what you're figuring out on the internet is a lot less value than somebody just looking at something and just being like, oh, bad, good, this sucks. You're stupid for thinking that this doesn't suck. You know what I mean? And it's not cute to be critical anymore because everybody's being spoon-fed and it's already like all the critical thinking is done for you by, content creators and people who actually read. So all you get to do is just regurgitate what they said on the internet, and you're right because Ryan Finn said it or something, like Mina Lay said it or something. And of course, these people are also opinionated, but their opinions are very strongly backed by research. Maybe more so Ryan Finn than Mina Lay. But when they're very backed by research, you get to just ride the coattails of what these people are saying because, oh, they said it, so it must be right. But where do you get your understanding from? Like, what reading have you done to come to your conclusions other than just hearing a smart person say it? And people like that give you a lot for free. And I think as much as content creation is like a boom now and everybody wants to be, it's like that one tweet where it's like everybody's obsessed with being a glamorous philosopher, but I think a lot of y'all are stupid. I think as much as that's like a big thing now, and I'm the one that's doing it in front of this camera as well, so I can't really talk, I think that is leading to a lot of people getting in front of cameras and being mediocre without reading. I may be catching out straight here. I don't think I am though.
He said I may be catching a stray. That's funny. But it's so true. What he said about, Ryan Finn or, any other content creator that makes really, really good content and is obviously very knowledgeable and well-researched on their opinions. But at the end of the day, a lot of fashion is still subjective, right? And so you shouldn't take, unless it's like something really factual, it's like factual reporting, you shouldn't take someone's opinion as law. You should kind of take that opinion and take the information that comes from that opinion and then do your own reading, I guess, and research if you have the time, and then formulate your own opinion from that. And so that's just such a good point. It's kind of like he said it's not cute to be critical anymore. That's definitely true. I think that even on YouTube as a platform, right? I think a big reason why my channel is not as big is because I don't do the whole polarizing for the sake of polarizing. I might say things that people find polarizing or crazy, but I'm not doing it for the effect of shock factor or whatever. I'm just saying my actual opinions, right? But I think that a lot of YouTubers who do the shock value thing and aren't really critical, they just either praise everything and make everything seem like it's the best thing since sliced bread and don't really have any critical takes on fashion at all, or they just completely bash things and, negativity breeds negativity, and that's why a lot of people just grow on being negative. And I just don't necessarily want to do that because I always want to talk about things in a deeper way. And so it's sad that kind of the social media platforms reward being inflammatory. It really, really is sad that that's the case. But it's true. It's true. I definitely agree with what Dolce Jeans was saying.
I think at the most, if you're gonna give somebody a tidbit of information, give them the entire source and be like, "Yo, you have to read this whole thing to understand what I just said." You know, to let people like really read more. And art is supposed to like fashion. It's not really an art. It's more of like an applied art. Because if it was an art, it wouldn't look like the runways would look so much different on a larger scale. But that's a whole different conversation. That's neither here or there. But I think art is beautiful because so many people can have different interpretations of it because of how we all perceive things differently and how different critical thinking skills produce different outcomes. And humans generally, we're all different, so we'll all have different critiques. But when you have a whole bunch of people being able to say something about fashion is bad or something about fashion is good or T, slay, buzzword, 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 and you're not able to give like a critical breakdown of it, I'm not saying everybody should be a scholar giving me a whole essay about why this collection is bad or not. But when nobody's doing that, it's a problem. And I think that's where we're headed. I think fashion is becoming more and more vain by the year because of, even more democratization and even more capitalism. Big conglomerates pushing brands to be more commercial than artistic. So it lessens appreciation for design.
What he's saying is so true. It's the same point I was making earlier about like people are rewarded for just being mindlessly negative. I'll give you a good example, right? When I review red carpet events, so when I reviewed like the Met Gala, I just title it Met Gala Review because I know I'm going to talk with a bit more nuance, right? But if I made a video that was titled The Trashiest Looks at the Met Gala 2024, that would have gotten views out of the wazoo. And I know this because I've been on YouTube long enough to know what works and what doesn't. I deliberately make videos sometimes I know there won't be that much interest because at the end of the day, it interests me. And the reason why I got into making YouTube videos in the first place was because at the time, I didn't really see anyone on YouTube analyzing fashion. And so I wanted to analyze fashion around, topics, ideas, brand that I find interesting. So I would get burnt out, I feel like, if I just start chasing views mindlessly and just making those kind of videos just because I know it gets loads of views and for no other reason other than that. So it's sad because what then happens is people that come into this with the wrong intentions are going to do that because their main goal and the main thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to get famous or they're trying to get big. And so that's what they do. And it's really sad. It's so, so sad that like fashion is, moving towards that direction. I think it's not a good thing in terms of like the way fashion discourse is going to be happening 20, 30 years from now.
Designers like J.W. Anderson who have a more artistic approach to things, The appreciation for critical thinking and critical theory in fashion and actually reading and understanding what's good and what's not and like formulating your own opinions would help fashion from the consumer all the way up to the creator, because I think fashion is like it's the art form with the biggest gap between the creator and consumer. I feel like by far, I think in terms of like know-how and knowledge of what's actually going on and what's like supposed to be classified as good and classified as bad, like good design, bad design, good quality, bad quality, all of that. But I think if more people were to like educate themselves without somebody else just easily doing it for them, then we could actually have a lot more of a critical, intelligent audience. And I think the mediocrity would at least slow down. But I think now, especially with the younger kids, it's becoming a lot of good, valuable information and good, valuable aspects of fashion and fashion understanding and engaging with fashion is being lost to being critical, just not being popular, and the prioritization of things looking cool over things actually having meaning. Again, not to be a buzzkill saying that everything should be super deep and no, there's obviously a time for fun fashion. That's always been a thing, but there has to be some type of pushback because everything can't just be fun, because some people actually value having a resonation with their actual clothes that they wear because of the meaning behind it. But if nobody has meaning behind their clothes, along with people who can't literally can't find the meaning behind clothes because they don't know how to like read between the lines, that they don't have the critical thinking skills because they don't read at all, I think we're in a bad spot in the future. We're in a bad spot now too because again, there's really a stupid pandemic. Like everybody but yeah, honestly, I think more gatekeeping would be healthy. Some people might bear the brunt of backlash about, oh, you're such a snobbish elitist. I don't think it's being elitist. I think it's actually just encouraging people to, like, yo, go find this information for yourself. Don't let me just tell you everything on the internet. Don't let Fashion Roadman or Ryan Finn or Liz Foster or Outlet Mode or The Casual or The Education or Understitch just tell you everything that there is to know about a designer. Go buy a book about the designer. Go buy a book about this time period of fashion or that time period or this brand or that brand. Just buy a book. Like, these books aren't even that long to read or hard to read. They're not using like crazy intelligent jargon or anything. Just go read something. But enough yapping. That's all I had to say. Thank you so much for watching. In my
So yeah, great video, as you guys have seen. So definitely subscribe to Dolce Jeans. Like I said, he makes really good videos, very thought-provoking, opens up good discussions as well. But yeah, I just agree with what he was saying, you know, that there is actually this assumption that if you're not giving someone information, you're an elitist automatically. But I think kind of what he was saying, which I agree with, is this idea that, no, I actually just want you to kind of seek the information for yourself and learn yourself. And that doesn't mean that when people ask me things, I don't tell them. I actually do both. So if someone asks me, how I do it is, if someone asks me like on Instagram, oh, what do you think about this designer? Or what do you think about, you know, this person? Or what did you think about this collection that this designer did? I'll tell them what I think, and then I'll be like, this is what I think. You can read this to learn more about it if you're interested. That's normally how I would phrase it. Or there's this book about this exact thing if you're interested. There's a documentary on this if you're interested. So if I know there's a resource that could be read or watched or listened to, like a podcast episode, I'll always push the person, not force them, obviously, but kind of give them the nugget to pursue the information further if they so wish. So I try not to just do the, I'm not telling you go and read a book, because obviously that's going to come across as really rude and low-key mean. So I try to do both. But I do agree with the sentiment that, you know, people just sometimes need to just seek the information from themselves rather than expecting someone else to do like the heavy lifting and then them to just get a revised version, because you're not even really getting the full context. It's like every time I summarize a book, you're missing the context. Even on Patreon, when I do like fashion book club episodes, I'm still summarizing. There's so much stuff I leave out, even though I'm reviewing a book chapter by chapter. I'm still leaving out so much information. And so you just don't get the full context. You really don't. There's so much stuff you miss out on when you don't do that. But not saying that everyone needs to be like a damn near fashion journalist in fashion or whatever. But I do think that, you know, there's a lot of positive things that can come out of having better discourse online in fashion. And not to say there are places where there's amazing discourse. There's so many forums, platforms. I've seen some really good forums on Reddit, for example. I will say that my Discord, we have really good fashion chats and fashion conversations. We even had an audio conversation not too long ago where we really talked about fashion for hours. So there's so many content creators that have garnered a really good community, like Tuba, Avalon, like these kind of content creators, and they've built like a really engaged audience where there's really good fashion discourse. But I think outside of these small, tiny corners of fashion on the internet, I think that in general, if we encourage more people to do more research, I think that things will improve. So yeah, great video once again. And it was great to share my thoughts on it. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.